Hello, everybody. Let's start. Our next seminar here is Agility to All, and can we help an Agile PMO? And absolutely says Marisa Silva, who is a passionate advocate of Agility to All, and especially to the PMOs. And Marisa is a senior consultant from Wellington, and also a founder of the PMO, where she has a quite provocative approach to agility, saying that if we, as organizations, especially the PMOs, will not go agile, then we will definitely die. And that is quite provocative. And in this seminar, she's going to give us a lot of information and concepts that she has found in her studies and seminars that are valuable for changing the PMO. Marisa is an experienced trainer and speaker as well, and she's a certified PPM and PMO consultant. She's going to give us a lot of tips about how to transform our PMOs, and with that, I would like to hand over the word to Marisa.
Thank you. Can you all hear me well, first of all?
Yes.
Good, that's a good start. Hello, so I'm Marisa Silva. Welcome to this session, and thank you for having me, and also to be here. It's fantastic to see so many people interested in the topic of PMOs and agility, or Agile. In fact, the Agile PMO is this almost mythical creature. We don't know exactly what it looks like. Some people say they have seen it. Some people believe that it exists. It's almost like the Loch Ness monster. Some people have evidence. We'll see. Funny enough, there's also another speaker who is going to talk about this topic tomorrow, Michael Lear. Michael, are you in the room?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So hopefully we are going to share consistent messages. But if I say some nonsense, we are going to do a quick exercise. So please don't say anything out loud. But I want you to pay very attention. This is what you are going to do. So pay attention, because it needs to be done very carefully, and it needs to be done very well. So you are going to look at me, and you are going to do like this. Concentration, dedication, that face of disappointment. Okay? Excellent. So without further delay, let me show you what we are going to cover. First of all, who I am. Then, why PMOs keep failing. This may be or may not be a surprise to you. And why PMO keeps rising. It's becoming more and more popular. Why can't we just get along, PMOs and Agile? Some tips on how to become an Agile PMO. And then the big, or actually the huge, as someone would say, A, and the small a in Agile. And we are going to finish with the Agile PMO Ultimate Survival Kit. So in case you need to survive, that's the only slide that you need to take. Okay? So Faith already did my presentation pretty much. You can see I'm also passionate, which is important because this is passion for projects. So I had to put that there, of course. But I'm also intrigued. And I say intrigued because it's concerning and intriguing that project management has been in place for a couple of years now. We share lessons, we have conferences, we have congresses, forums for discussion, and our projects keep failing year after year. So something is still failing. So this intrigues me a lot, I should say. I'm also, let's say, secretary of the APM PMOC. So this is a specific interest group for PMOs in the UK, the Association for Project Management. So PMOs is what I like to discuss the most. I like to set up PMOs, run PMOs, and transform PMOs, which is the most challenging part. Programs Director at Project Managers Without Borders. For the ones of you who attended last year, Passion for Projects, we had a session also on this topic. I highly encourage you to join us. It's a volunteer organization, and we use our project management skills for social good. So we do project management remotely with other colleagues in countries in development. I'm also an author of a book called Bedtime Stories for Project Managers, which is not on the top 10 of Amazon yet, but we can do it. If all of you buy it today, maybe we can get there. Okay? So I'm counting on you. But the most important thing that I want you to know about me, and this is now a disclaimer, is that I'm not an Agilista, I'm not a Scrum Master, and I'm not an Agile coach. I only know about PMOs, and I've been in a situation where I was asked to now go into Agile. How can we support Agile? So I want to share my experience with you too. So you know a bit about me. I now want you to know a bit about you. How many of you work in an organization that has a PMO? Okay, so most of you do. And how many of you actually work in a PMO, either if it is project, program, portfolio? Okay. And from the ones who work in a PMO, how many of you have been asked to support Agile projects, or projects running an Agile approach? And how many of you are actually supporting Agile projects? Okay, this is getting worse and worse. One last question, actually. And how many of you perceive or are perceived by the business, by organizations, as being trusted, value-added partners? Are you adding value as a PMO? Yeah? Oh, okay. I'm intrigued again, you see? There it is. So in fact, 68% of organizations have a PMO, and this aligns pretty much with what we see here, where you all raise your hands. However, if we ask how many of those 68% are perceived as delivering value, statistics say that only 33% are perceived as delivering that value. So this is concerning indeed, and it shows that we need to do something about it to actually think how the PMO is perceived and how we can make it more close to the business, more close to our organizations. One can also say that PMOs are almost suffering from an identity crisis. People ask, is the PMO that the end of the PMO as you know it? Why can't we survive? Why do PMOs keep failing after 2 or 3 years? So this is indeed something that we should think about in the way that PMOs have been. Do you have a question? Sorry? Okay, please.
What do you mean by failing?
Okay. Failing, like success, can be perceived in very different ways. And in fact, from a PMO perspective, that is something that you should agree with your PMO sponsor, with your stakeholders, of what success is for them. So define what are the critical success criteria. However, by failing, in the context of this presentation, I mean that they are terminated. Okay? Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, if you have any question, please feel free to ask as well. So my view is that the PMO, the rumors of the PMO that have been exaggerated, but they should still alarm us. So we need to understand why do we get this view that PMOs fail after 2 or 3 years, and why is so many people saying that the PMO is no longer a valuable entity to have in organizations. Some of you may be experiencing this situation where your project managers may be showing some resistance. And this is not just to the PMO, one can say, but also because traditional project management approaches, they do not always work as effectively as we would like. So some say that the failure of the PMO has also to do with the close link to how project management, the current paradigm, the dominant paradigm, is implemented. In the way that it's mostly driven about processes, and also PMOs have then created this bad reputation about being the police, the templates, the checklists, rather than delivering actual value. So I once read a sentence saying that the most boring or interesting thing that you can ask about God is if He exists or not. When it comes to project management, I also think that the most boring thing that you can ask is which one is better, waterfall and Agile. I don't like that debate, but of course I have to talk a little bit about it today because this is about Agile in a way. But I think that there's no one single best approach, and the PMO, one of their roles is actually to understand what would be the most suitable approach to use in the project based on its complexity dimension and so on. But I've seen that there are sort of fanatical or purist approaches, or people that almost see it like football clubs, where you either cheer for Agile or you cheer for waterfall. So one can also say that ultimately that joke about the terrorists and the methodologies is true. Have you heard that one? So what's the difference between a terrorist and a methodologist? It's that sometimes you can negotiate with the terrorists. So when it comes to methodologies, they can become very fanatical, like football clubs. And when it comes to football, I'm Portuguese, so I love football, and Cristiano Ronaldo is the best, so no doubt. But in project management, we typically see this kind of debate. So this can also take us to understand, as you can see here, one of the reasons why Agile has become so popular is because it is related on how we respond to changes, and also related to where the value is being demonstrated. So rather than waiting until the end, have that example there, 90% of the project is completed, let's now see if the rest is also successful. With Agile, is much more, that notion of value is much more present and visible. And in fact, if we go to the chaos report, you can see that statistics even say that Agile, also relying on the popularity that I was referring, is successful for most of the projects, in particular when it comes to small size projects. Okay? However, Agile as an approach is just an umbrella, and this is important to say as well. And I'm not here to teach Agile, but just to clarify some conceptions. So if I'm a PMO, I don't know anything about Agile, and then all of a sudden I start discovering that this is actually what the Agile landscape looks like. We have scaled Agile, we have less extreme programming, Scrum, Kanban, all mixed together. So it can be overwhelming for PMOs that are working in a traditional approach and now want to do that transition to an Agile environment. So I'm going to make life easier for you. And rather than showing all of them, this map, very complex, as Andrew was saying in the beginning, sometimes the difficult task is actually to make it simpler. So I'm trying to represent it here. So Agile in a nutshell, rather than having that big map, what we have here is the key principles, what Agile is about. And again, the slides are going to be available at the end. But it all goes back to the manifesto. And although we are talking about Agile today, Agile has been in place for 20 years now. We are still talking about it as if it was a new thing. It is not. Okay? So here you can see pretty much what Agile is about in terms, and also comparison with the more traditional approaches. But if we decompose it even simpler, one step further, this would be a good way to explain it. So going back to basics, of course we would see that in a waterfall approach, scope is fixed, while in Agile, time and cost are fixed, and on the other hand, time and cost are estimated in waterfall, and it's scope that is estimated in Agile. And this can lead to some challenges for the PMO, because the PMO is typically concerned about what is going to be delivered. How are we going to measure if we achieved what was expected or not? And if scope is estimated, this brings some additional difficulties. So some of the questions that the PMO suddenly has to answer when transitioning to this Agile world would be, for instance, how do we cope with less precise business cases? Given that we don't know exactly what the project is going to be, how do we even prioritize them one against the other, doing some portfolio management? How do we recognize and report if an Agile is going well or not? We are so used to our status reports and to our metrics. Suddenly we need new ones. And the same thing for stage gates, for instance. All PMOs love stage gates, at least I do. So in Agile, this is also something that we need to move to understand what it means in an Agile environment. So in extreme, one can also say that those are antagonic positions. And again, I should say that I don't agree with it, but in an extreme, and you can see being very flexible. Flexibility is actually very innovative. In this case, it's even outside of where it should be. So PMO all about predictability, while Agile is all about innovation. In the PMO, we are after discipline, we are after consistency, while in Agile is much more after flexibility. Then, of course, change control. We do have change requests. If you want to have a change, we actually need you to complete this form, and we need to actually review it, and then someone will approve it or not. While in Agile, we want to experiment. We want to embrace change rather than resist it. Then, of course, we have processes and flow, as Andrew was saying before. Bureaucracy, and on the other hand, chaos, stage gates and iteration, and compliance and customer satisfaction. There's this view that Agile, to an extreme, can almost be like the silver bullet. I don't agree, in the same way that I don't agree that PMOs are always necessary. There are cases where they are useful, of course, the same thing for Agile. We need to identify which projects are the most suitable ones. But if we merge the two, we will see that they are not usually mutually exclusive. They are not incompatible. Because if you go back to basics again, what makes a PMO a PMO? It doesn't matter if it is waterfall or if it is Agile. Because in the end, they are ruled by the same 5 principles. They should be an instrument of integration, so breaking the silos, bringing together people, practices, departments. They should be the trusted source of truth, and it doesn't matter if it is at the project level, program level, or portfolio level. They are the consciousness of that project, or the program, or the portfolio. And they should serve the customer. So they are aligned in Agile in that way too. Their main purpose is that satisfaction. Enabling capability, so ensuring that the teams, the delivery teams, have all the competencies that they need, that they are being trained, coached, mentored. And finally, promoting and supporting a learning organization. So ensuring that lessons learned, or retrospectives if you prefer, are being considered, and that a culture of transparency, even of failure, if we want, is being helped and created by the PMO. So at the end of the day, if the PMO is still adhering to those 5 principles, it is still what I consider to be a good PMO, and is still applicable to waterfall and Agile. However, when Agile is introduced, when someone knocks on the door and says, we should do Agile now, typically one of 3 scenarios happen. The first one, and the classic, is let's get rid of the PMO. Okay? Have you had this experience before? Any of you? Okay. Well, I'm lucky I haven't. So that's what I call myself a lucky PM. But this is a classic situation where, because people think that they are incomparable, that the PMO is still much perceived as a blocker rather than an enabler, the PMO is the first department to get rid of. We then have the situation where, let's then just change the PMO name. We don't even know what the P stands for, if it is project, program, portfolio. Actually, my favorite for PMO is pisses me off. Okay? So let's not call it PMO, let's call it something else. Maybe portfolio office. Portfolio sounds much more strategic, and all PMOs like to sound strategic, right? So let's call it portfolio office instead. Or let's maybe think of transformation. Transformation, that's a key word nowadays. Everyone wants to transform the world. So maybe transformation would be the best option. Let's keep that in mind. Value, value, PMOs, Agile, it all makes sense. So value-driven office maybe. Or, I get it, Agile PMO. That's the key word. Okay? So changing the PMO name is the second scenario that you will see probably happening. It actually reminds me of the story of the 3 letters. Not letters like ABC, but letters that you will read. And it also explains why simply changing the name is not a sustainable approach. So there was once was this PMO manager, new in the job, and he's given 3 letters by his predecessor. And he's ordered to only open and read those letters when ordered. So he's been in the job for, I don't know, let's say 3 months, and then people start to becoming unsatisfied. The crisis starts to rise. And he's asked to then open the first letter. And the letter says, blame your predecessor. That's exactly what he does. He blames the predecessor, goes to a meeting, says, oh, this was our previous PMO didn't know what he was doing, so this is why we are now in this situation. The crowd suddenly becomes more calm, they understand what the situation was, the crisis is gone. After 6 more months, we have another crisis. And the PMO manager is asked to read the second letter. And the second letter says, create something strategic, transformational, do a big global initiative. And he does just that. New ways of working Agile. All the organization is invited to participate. And this, of course, takes time, takes effort. But while people are paying attention to it, they forgot about the crisis. They are now concentrating on something else. After 1 year, we have a new crisis. And the PMO manager is asked to open the third letter. And the third letter just says, write 3 letters. Okay? So this is not sustainable. It's just changing the name. It's just creating a short-term solution. And finally, we have my favorite, which is, oh, with Agile, you'll be fine. It's easy to learn. You don't even need training. Just read something on the internet. And you then have the situation of the PMO, the black dog, in the middle of the sheep, not knowing what he's supposed to do. Okay? So different approaches. Of course, this is nothing that I would recommend, but it's something that we still can see sometimes. So, some tips on how to become an Agile PMO. I have 7 tips here. First of all, find your common grounds, and we are now going to explore each of those. Then, understand the PMO value life cycle. So, value is very important for the PMO as an entity, but we need to understand exactly what does that mean. Changing the perspective, also creating just enough governance, and I emphasize the just enough part. Use features, be your Agile team's best friend, and test it yourself. So not just the PMO who is supporting Agile, but also PMO who is using, incorporating Agile. So starting with the first one, start with why. And I think it was either Catherine or Andrew also mentioned. Have any of you watched the TED Talk by Simon Sinek or read the book? It's very good, yes. So it also, what it tells us is that the most important thing that we need to do when starting any kind of initiative, even for ourselves, for our own journey, is to understand exactly why we are doing it. And this is more important than the method or who we surround ourselves with. So value is in your understanding what your why is. So both the PMO and the Agile teams, they operate in common grounds. They are after value, they are after satisfaction. The difference is that the delivery teams, they manage projects or delivery, while the PMO manages 4 projects. So they enable all the factors that surround the project, the organization, to make it work. So that one is the main aspect of it. If you start with why, understanding what's common, you then have a synergy that you can use. The next one is about the PMO value life cycle. As I mentioned, value is very important for the PMOs, but you need to understand exactly how it works. So the first thing would be to capture value. Value is subjective. That's the problem with value. So don't be afraid to ask your stakeholders what do they mean and what are their pain challenges, their pain points, their challenges. How is value perceived? Then, of course, you should design your services, your service catalog, your functions to meet their expectations, to address that perception of value. And this is where I see PMOs failing a lot, which is they start by identifying what type of PMO they want to do, or they want to be, or what kind of services they want to provide, and they then didn't even ask their stakeholders, their customers, what their challenges are, what is keeping them awake at night. Okay? So you should only design the PMO once you are clear on what is the perception of value in your organization. And finally, measuring value, which is something that requires some level of maturity. So typically, if you are after looking at a project management maturity model or even CRMI, this would be a level 4 already. And it's all about tracking not just the performance of the portfolio of the projects, but the performance of the PMO itself. So if you are sure that we need to demonstrate that value, and that is done by measuring it, having some KPIs, key performance indicators in place. And finally, of course, communicating value. We can be very good at what we do, but if you don't shout about it, no one will know. So use different communication methods, newsletters, forums, demos, something that you can demonstrate how the PMO is generating value. Also, third tip, change your perspective. So the PMO is still seen as the receiver of all the information. We are almost the sun, or the earth in this case, and all the information exists around us. So in terms of reporting, we are very, very demanding, I would say, incorrectly. Silva's control function. So we have the example there, I need a status report by Friday. Then also in terms of tools, we should say, let's now implement a tool. And this is something that PMOs do without even considering if they need it or not. I always like to say that a fool with a tool is still a fool. So it's very important that you understand if you need it or not. Then, of course, training. What training courses should we give them this year? We are not even asking them. We are putting ourselves as the owners of all the knowledge. I actually don't like the word center of excellence because of that, because it assumes that the PMO is excellent, which can be not always the case. But in this case, it's important that you actually ask what do your customers want. And finally, methodology. You have the example there, you must follow the methodology. This is almost a mantra for PMOs, unfortunately. Or you have the example also of change requests, which as I was mentioning, in an Agile environment, can be tricky. So we need to change the perspective from inward-looking to outward-looking. So it's not what can, almost like that quote from Kennedy, I think, or Roosevelt, do not think what the country can do for you, think about what you can do for your country. This is exactly the same with PMOs. So we need to put ourselves in our customer shoes and understanding, first of all, value, if we are doing the right projects, then also our objectives, if we have achieved them or not, engagement, if our stakeholders are happy. So rather than controlling, and Agile teams are self-empowered, as you know, so having that view of trust, and finally support. So the mindset changes to how can the PMO help you, okay? I actually like that example from the general or commander who is alerted by the soldier that, oh, we are now surrounded by enemies from all sides. He's very alarmed about it. And the general says, that's excellent. We can now attack them from any angle. So we need to change that mindset, that perspective, put ourselves in their shoes. Then in terms of governance is also a function, a service that PMOs provide. I think that is something very critical in the relationship between PMOs and Agile teams. In the way that I've seen the Agile Manifesto being distorted in various ways. One of them considering that we don't need documentation. That's not what the Agile Manifesto says. It says that between working software and documentation, one is valued over the other. So we still need some documentation, we still need people to make decisions, right? So rather than just thinking about MVP, which I'm sure you know, minimum viable product, we also need to consider from a PMO perspective, what is our MVB, minimum viable bureaucracy. So this would be the least amount of structure and process that we can get away with to avoid total chaos. So it's in the middle, finding that balance between bureaucracy and between chaos. Okay? That is also seen here. So bureaucracy can measure it being the level of effort divided by the level of benefit. So it has to do with the number of people that are required to complete that function or that service, that process, frequency, also the effort divided by benefits, and the duration of the task. So of course you are not going to apply this to exactly as it is, but just by thinking about it, what is the effort that is required, what is the benefit that we are gaining from it, you may be in a better position to find what is the minimum viable bureaucracy that you need in the PMO. Then reporting and using visual aids. Who needs status report? That's my question. So I was working in a PMO a couple of, actually 1 year ago, and we were using the traditional status report where we had a couple of rounds as well. And people start using Trello instead, Kanban boards. So what we did was we stopped using the traditional status reports and we started Trello boards as our indication for progress. So we had to change that mindset. So visual progress doesn't need to be exactly in the status report. It can be in a Kanban board. We can do it through weekly demos where the teams actually show you where they are in the project. Okay? And you have some examples there. Also continuous improvement. I'm not sure if this is working. It's not very well. But just a note, because visual aids also help very much with continuous improvement, but you should only do continuous improvement that is actually useful. So the worst example of continuous improvement that I found was this one from Wikipedia, where you have a penguin and someone playing pipes. And the improvement, this is a couple of years listed. I think the first one is, well, I'm not sure if you have the dates there, but let's say that there was 2 years of difference. And the first one says there's a penguin and there's someone playing pipes, and then the other one says there's a penguin on the right, and then someone playing pipes. So this is not continuous improvement, okay? Or this is continuous improvement that is not useful, I would say, helpful. And then you also have a fail wall. And this requires courage. It's only for the brave now. So it requires a certain level of maturity, transparency, and courage as well. So failure is something that should be encouraged. Failing earlier, failing fast, so that we can also recover and provide the necessary recommendations much faster. So having a fail wall is also a visual aid that you can use for your lessons learned, for instance. Okay? Then the role of the PMO also changes. Rather than being a function of control, as you can see there in the direct reporting line, where we can have the project manager responding directly to the PMO in some cases, and you have also then a more linear structure with the project manager, a business analyst, and then the different managers in their resources, their teams. So much command and control. In an agile environment, the PMO is no longer sitting at the top. So instead, we are on the side. Okay? So we are a supportive and an advisory role, rather than that vision of command and control. Our role as a PMOs in an agile environment would be to provide that level of coaching, that level of guidance that the delivery teams need. So in an agile environment, the PMO is the home of the agile coaches, or at least that's how I see it. The ones that they go back if they need some assistance. So in summary, what does a good agile PMO looks like? They perform a supportive and consulting role, as we just saw. Rather than being command and control, we do provide that level of guidance, that level of coaching. We do enable the capability. We understand the expected value of the project and also the value of the PMO, in line with the PMO value life cycle that I was referring before. Provide a home for the Agile coaches as well. We help with communication and engagement of the project management community. And this is very important because, as I mentioned, we are instruments of integration. So we are that communicating bridge between the delivery teams and the senior leadership team, between strategy delivery and strategy planning. The PMO is also the one who builds capabilities and ensures that the roles are well trained. So again, that principle of enabling the capability in-house creates an environment where failure is welcomed, in line with the principle of supporting a learning organization. Assists in the selection of the right method, practice, and tools. So rather than just being fanatical about the method, one or the other, we should instead understand what is the most suitable approach for a certain project. Not if you are building a bridge, probably Agile will not go well in that regard. Okay? So we need to understand exactly what would suit the different environments. Then also it's a communicating bridge, as I was mentioning, between teams and organization. And very important, is the one who speaks and translates the Agile language to the business. So we need someone to be that intermediary role, that middleman who actually translates the other way around, from the business to the Agile teams. And finally, is a servant leader. Rather than saying, I need this for you, the perspective changes. I'm here to support you. How can I help you? So that should be the question that you should ask as a PMO. And you can apply yourself some Agile principles, like, for instance, continuous improvement, also self-empowered teams, and the others that we have in the manifesto. So this is what I consider a good Agile PMO to look like. However, we have been talking a lot about Agile, but as you may have noticed from the title of this presentation, this is not about Agile, it's about agility. So there's a difference between the big A, or the huge A, and the small a in Agile. Nowadays, it's pretty much, well, not pretty much, but I've seen some examples where people, they use Jira and they do daily stand-ups and they say, we are now Agile. Okay? In fact, there are companies that are so Agile that they don't do daily stand-ups anymore. They do plank meetings. They are very, very Agile. They keep it very short, very Agile. Okay? So the difference between the huge A and the small a has to do with the mindset, doing Agile and being Agile. So doing Agile has to do with the methods that you use. We have seen from the map that I showed you before that there are several. It has to do with the techniques, the frameworks, the practices, while being Agile is the philosophy, is your mindset, ensuring that you are in line with the principles that you had in the manifesto, following the values, and also promoting that transparency, collaboration, and trust. Okay? It's a situation where the practices, the values are already embedded. It's not something that you force to it. In fact, you are focusing, you can see it here, that if you focus on the mindset, so being Agile, rather than the tool set, doing Agile, the impact that you get over time is much more sustainable. And it's pretty much like with eggs, I like to say. If you exert some sort of force, if you break the egg from the outside, you are killing something, right? But if the egg breaks from the inside, it means that life is being born. So if you work on that mindset, trying to ensure that that change happens in the inside, in the teams, in the behaviors, then you are creating new life. And this also aligns with the view from the PMI talent triangle, where we are remembered that project management is not just about technical project management, but also about ensuring that we have strategic and business management and, of course, leadership. At the end of the day, I think that project management is just about two things: managing relationships and making decisions. So this aligns very well. Of course, you can then know about knowledge areas and techniques and so on, and that helps. But at the end of the day, if you are good at managing relationships and making decisions, in my view, you are a good project manager, and you are also a good PMO manager, in the way that the P in PMO is not about project, program, or portfolio. It's about people. Okay? So agility, much more important than agile. Being agile and doing agile, two different concepts. And you are now sitting very comfortably, so I want to change that. I have an exercise for you, a challenge, let's say. Are you up to it?
Yep.
Won't take long. So, I want you all to stand up. Stand up, clap, jump, sit. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, can go back. Thank you. And this is not just to energize you, but also to make a point. That agility is all about how quickly you are to adapt to the unexpected. Probably you were not expecting to do this in the conference today, in the session. So the fact that you respond quickly shows that you are being agile. You see? It's all about how companies, departments, projects adapt and respond to changes in the market. Make sense? Good. So then, the Agile PMO Ultimate Survival Kit. So if you were to leave with just one slide, there are also some other good ones, but maybe this would be the one. So you should switch from control to a support function, so enabling, changing the role of the PMO, being on the side, providing that guidance, ensuring that the delivery teams have the capabilities that they need. You can identify areas to streamline and waste reduce, so applying those agile principles to yourself as the PMO. Seek your minimal viable bureaucracy. So again, looking at the level of governance that you are applying to your projects, finding what is that fine balance. What exactly is just the governance that you need. Just enough. Understand the PMO value life cycle, what it means to your customers, because that's exactly your common grounds that you are going to share with your delivery teams, your agile teams, and how you can then deliver and design your PMO to attend to that value, measure it, and demonstrate it. Put yourself in your customer's shoes, so understanding what their key pains are and how you can address them. Build a fail-friendly environment. Remember that fail wall, of course, as I mentioned, requires some maturity, but you can start small. Just having honest conversation with your teams, letting them report red projects rather than watermelon projects, where they seem green in the outside and then you look closer and then they are red. Okay? And finally, communicate, communicate, and communicate. PMOs are all about communication. If you want to demonstrate your value, that's the thing that you need to do. And finally, we talked about agility and agile as well. Just two final notes to say why you should bother with agile or with agility. The first one is because if you don't, someone else will. And you have the example here of Blockbuster and Kodak. Those are the classics now, where they didn't respond as quickly as you to the changes in the environment, to the unexpected. And that led to the bankruptcy of both of them, of course, the rise of Netflix. And finally, because if you don't care, if you don't bother with agility now, it may be too late later. And you have the example here, like with global warming, we need to be quicker to act. So I invite you to do the same in your organizations and in your projects. And thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. We have now had the concepts, the hints, and all the tips from her. And we are open for questions.
And I love questions. Okay? I always say, If I know the answer, it makes me look good. If I don't know, it makes you look good. So we all win.
So I have the first question, Marisa, for you. I know that when companies are going from traditional waterfall, so going to Agile and then of course to agility, and now we're also discussing with the PMOs going to be Agile and agility, right? Most of the companies are saying that when we go Agile and also become get into agility, we don't need the project managers. So why do we need the PMOs?
That's
agility.
actually a very good question, because typically it's almost the other way around. We have so competent project managers, why do we need the PMOs? Also aligning with what we were saying in a sense. So if you look back to the PMO principles, you'll see things there that project managers, it's not their area of expertise. In fact, the competencies that are required by PMOs and project managers, and here I'm talking about project managers in the general sense, we can be talking about Scrum Masters and other Agile roles, of course, but those competencies are differentiated. So the project manager is very focused on its own project, while the PMO, particularly if operating at a more portfolio level, for instance, or even as a center of competence level, would need to have a wider, more holistic view of the organization and, of course, have the competencies to be able to serve that purpose. So if you go back to the PMO principles, there are things like, for instance, enabling capability, which the Agile coaches can do to some extent, but there are, of course, other departments, other agents in the project organization that are not directly impacted by the Agile coaches typically, so the PMO can help with that mission. And also another one about being a single source of truth. Of course, each project will have their view, but to gain that consolidated, that high level or helicopter view, the PMO would be in a better position the more high level to have that. Does that help?
Thank you. Next question.
Is no one going to ask me why do I consider myself lucky? I always get that one. I was prepared for that one today. Should I tell you anyway? You want to hear?
Yes.
Okay. So there are 4 reasons. The first one is because I think that luck plays an important role in our lives, and we don't always acknowledge it. It's not just hard work, or at least not for me. Sometimes I actually get lucky on the things that happen to me. Then the second reason is because I've been very lucky with the projects that I've been involved with, some big organizations in the UK and internationally, and also with the teams and the people that I met throughout my career. So that's something that I feel very fortunate about. The third reason has to do with an old saying that says that there are no good project managers, only lucky ones. The more you plan, the luckier you get. And finally, the most obvious reason, it's because the lazy PM was already taken. So. Any other questions? Come on, don't be shy. It's me who is not in the spotlight, not you.
Hi. So I was wondering a little bit, how do you convince overall the customers to pay for the PMO and the project managers or Scrum Masters? How do you convince the customers to buy products without the defined scope?
That's a question for the Agile people in the room. But just kidding. So I think you should focus on the objective of that project rather than exactly what are the features that are going to be part of it. So of course this can be more tricky from a commercial perspective because typically you have to assign a cost to each of the deliverables, or at least that would what would happen in a more traditional approach. In an Agile one, I would say that you should focus on the end goal. So you sell the end goal rather than exactly what the intermediary steps are going to be. But if someone has a different view, please feel free to help me. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
it's time for us to sum up now, because another Silva will be starting in the room. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much, Marisa.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. And you have my contacts. Feel free to connect with me, and I'll be around throughout today and tomorrow. Thank you.